Hello, we're talking about an all-female workforce. They started by making jam. They were in the Oscars goodie bag. Now it's whiskey. I'm John Beattie. Welcome to Cask to Glass, the whiskey podcast where I explore the heritage and flavour of Scotland's national drink and the world's favourite spirit. In this episode, I'm talking to Kim Cameron of Bothy Distillery in the Highlands. Kim, thank you very much for talking to me.
Nice to see you.
How are you? You've been singing all weekend, I believe.
Yeah, we had a Drams till dusk in the Bothy Prosen, so apologies for any listeners. My voice is a little bit husky today. I sing traditional Bothy songs and it was a session late into the night, so a little bit husky today.
Paints a good picture of Scotland. What's pardon my stupidity, what's Bothy songs?
So, Bothy songs are traditional songs from the northeast of Scotland and traditionally sung by men or farm workers. And in a time before TV and radio, even, they sang songs and shared stories. And Bothy songs were traditional from the northeast. There are Bothy ballad competitions even in the northeast of Scotland. And I was brought up with Bothy songs and traditional song. So at the end of a tasting, I started 11 years ago asking people, have you been in a Bothy? Have you ever sung Bothy before? And it just began to be something that I do. So I wrote a song about 11 years ago, all about what Bothies mean to me. And I wrote it myself, so I can't ever get into trouble in the purists by singing the wrong tune or the wrong lyrics. And it's kind of just something that we do now in the Bothy. And, for me, music and song is part of our traditional culture that if we lose it in our generation, we've lost something quite special.
It's brilliant, isn't it? And just explain to everybody listening what a Bothy is.
Well, Bothies have different um, meanings, I guess. The traditional description would be a home in the hills, so somewhere that you go for shelter when the weather changes and you need to get off the mountain. So it's a lifeline in some parts. They're normally between 7 and 15 miles up a track, and you shelter in them. They're free for and most of them that you would go into for shelter. And people stay the night in a bothy in the Highlands. It's become quite a thing, and they've been mapped out in a book now. So, in the Highlands, they're a shelter. In the farmlands of Scotland, they are a place where single men used to live before they were married or before they kind of moved to a bigger house. And two or three guys would stay in a farm bothy from the age of about 13 onwards with their kist. And then in some other parts, you've got the shepherds' huts, shepherds' bothies, but from our point in the glens, they would also where the gamekeepers, helpers, the bothy loons, bothy lads would have stayed when they were helping out on the hills.
Very good. Yeah, in my head, a Bothy is somewhere when you're up a hill and you need shelter. You go for the Bothy, don't you? Before we get cracking and talking about your business and it all came from jam, do you drink whiskey? And if you drink whiskey, how do you take it?
Well, I'm learning to drink whiskey. I'm definitely on a whiskey journey. I've an amazing master blender and whiskey team that their aim is to get me to be a whiskey connoisseur. I would say I'm at the very start. I like Speyside. I like it neat. I am experimenting with different flavor combinations. Don't kill the messenger, but with cocktail serves and
Mm.
different seasonal syrups that we add to our gins that we're also working with whiskey, because I think there are more and more people that would move into the world of whiskey if we can create these serves. So a rosehip syrup I'm drinking at the moment, it helps my throat and it's also great with a whiskey, and a highball with ginger. So I'm experimenting with my whiskey knowledge, but yeah, Speyside neat on ice for me.
Do you know, everybody we've spoken to says the same thing. The way to get whiskey back up there is cocktails and highballs. So, but can we talk about your business? I love it. Is that a flip chart? It's not a flip chart, is it? It's something behind you. You started with jam, which is quite a story.
Yeah, I'm often called an accidental distiller. So I entered a jar of jam into the World Championships. Now that it's a thing, it was held in our local city of Dundee, obviously famous for marmalade. And I entered a jar of jam that I got in the Glen, and I had a coffee shop there. So I entered this jar of jam, won a category, and came back and converted a bothy, a small bothy, in Glenisla, and a production kitchen in it, and I was making jam in the bothy. So the brand is called Jam Bothy, and I followed the full seasonal calendar of Scotland. In Angus, we grow the most amazing fruit. I say arguably the best of the world. A raspberry, rhubarb, blueberry, strawberry, sloe, back into late autumn raspberry, and I was making the full seasonal calendar of jam. Now, one of the byproducts of making so much jam was I had some juice and fruit left over, and rather than waste that, we decided to add it to gin. Now, this was 11 years ago, so it was before the gin boom had started. And the long and the short of that story is that there was more people coming up the Glen for the gin than the jam, and the jam took a bit of a seat, and we focused on the Gin Bothy as a brand. And we're now one of the most award-winning great taste producers of jam and gin in the northeast of Scotland. So that's how my entry into the world of spirit happened. And yes, behind me is a board that we use every day in the office now called our Jam to Dram journey. And it's taken us back from 2014, all the different events that have happened that have taken us on the journey now into Dram. So Jam to Dram is probably the strapline we use, but it really all did start with jam. We do a lovely whiskey marmalade, which is our bestseller, and was always a link with whiskey. But I didn't ever imagine that we would be in a position where we'd be distilling whiskey in the Glens.
Tell me about that, because obviously we're a whiskey podcast. Not that we're sticking religiously to whiskey, but you've got this thing called Gunshot whiskey, which is, I've been on your website a lot, and it seems to be very popular. And we'll get into in a minute that you're in some of the big stores now. You're in Morrison's locally, I think, with your gins, maybe not with the whiskey. Tell me about Gunshot whiskey, because it's a blend, isn't it?
Yeah, so Gunshot whiskey came on the back of our best-selling gin, which is Gunshot Gin. And I was selling that into the US market. And one of the things that we were always told on feedback was we love the flavour profile. So it was cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, spice, those really rich, warming flavours. But we had distilled it with gin. And the biggest thing that the export market wanted was it in a whiskey. So we flipped the base and called it Gunshot whiskey. It was designed originally to be, so we've got a blended whiskey, an 8-year-old blend, and then a whiskey liqueur. And that was originally for the export market. And it still is. But our customers here, ones that followed our gin journey, have always asked me, when are you moving into whiskey? When are you moving into whiskey? And we were able to take the 8-year-old blend and then the Gunshot whiskey liqueur, which is very similar to our Gunshot gin. So those warming flavours and a little bit of honey in there as well. So something you would have neat on ice or in a hip flask. So Gunshot was the brand that started us with export. But ultimately we wanted to be able to produce our own single malt, and it's taken a long time to find the site. I think it's the perfect site, but we'll be laying down our own single malt in late 2025. The stills come at the end of this month. We're in November, but depending on commissioning, we'll either be laying down end of December or early January 2026.
Tell me about that then. Tell me about your own whiskey.
So we have a site, it's an old whiskey smuggling route in a glen called Glen Prosen. So Angus is called the gateway to the Glens, and Glen Prosen is called the hidden glen, the secret glen. It's one road in, one road out, and we have been really lucky to be the guardians of the next stage of that glen. And we're right at the very top of the glen, so any Scottish listeners will maybe know that, but they don't know the top of the glen, which is where we are. So we secured the buildings there in January this year. So we have our distillery there, we have our visitor centre there, and our whiskey bothy that people can come and stay in. And that path is the old smuggling route that we can date whiskey up there back to 1703 in illicit distilling. And it takes you right up to the Kilbo Bothy, which ironically is the same bothy that I designed my logo on across all the brands all those years ago. So it's where I was brought up, just one glen over. A really, really special place. And yeah, that's where our distillery is. So it's taken us quite a while to get to the point that we've now got the stills in. Our stills have been created in Forsyth. So I really wanted Scottish stills. We've had a whole, I guess, the challenges of opening any distillery. We're in the Cairngorm park. We've just put in our own boreholes, so we run on hydro. It's a fully sustainable site. And it has had lots of challenges, even to the point that the roads have had, not just because of us, but the roads have had to be strengthened to take today's traffic, which
Yeah.
was planned all those years ago. And it's a really special place for us. It's an empty glen. These buildings were empty. So we've been able to bring an economic driver back into a really fragile rural economy. I have a team of 26 women and one man. So our master blender is a man. I'll talk about him later. But we've been really lucky to be able to grow a business and build a business around life, and that has meant working with a female workforce who are just incredible and continue to stand by me in decisions and kind of take us on the next path. So the distillery's in Glen Prosen, and we're aiming to open in April next year to visitors. So it'll give us a little bit of time to get our feet under the stills.
I love the symmetry of 300 years ago there. Somebody else is distilling illegal whiskey up the same glen, and here you are 300 years later doing it. Tell me about this female workforce. I didn't know about that. Just why and what makes it special?
Well, it was never really planned, to be honest. It's in rural Angus, a lot of men are farming, they're gamekeeping, they're maybe traveling to oil industry. The female workforce is the most available, and they can work life and work around the brand. We tend to work heavily out in school working times and then not so much out with. And I've been able to craft a really experienced team of women round life, and that's very much part of why we've been able to operate the way we have in all our jam, our butter, our gin, our rum, and now into our whiskey. We are recruiting for a distiller. They have been all male distillers that have applied. So if it's the right person for the job, that's the criteria. It was never really designed to be only women, but I'm very lucky that I have the team that I have.
Tell me about the scale of the business. I didn't know before you and I talked just beforehand you do butter. So you do jam, butter, gin, whiskey. Uh, how big a business is it? And the butter is what? Local dairy herd gives you the product to make it into butter. How does it all work?
So some of these additions have been accidental and really just to protect it. The jam we've always had, and then butter came about because in Forfar, which is where our warehouse is, it's originally called the Butter Market. There was 18 producers of butter in Forfar at one point, and our last surviving butter manufacturer at the dairy closed. And I had been interested in working with botanical butters, so in the same ways with the gin, rosemary, thyme. And he said to me, I don't have any time for that. We need to sell the business. It's not financially viable now to run the dairy. And I said, well, don't sell the butter business. Let me keep that in Angus, and it'll sit beside my jam portfolio. And we moved the butter, 140-year-old third generation butter business. We moved into our production a year and a half ago now, and we still do it by hand. We use a different kind of machine now. They use the butter plats, and we use it's actually a refurbished sausage machine that my dad gave me many years ago that we've refurbished to do into butter logs. So yeah, Butter Bothy joined the team, and then so our food products, and then our spirit range. We have our gin range and our liqueurs and our spirits. We launched Hip Flask Spirits, which is our volume driver. So that's the one that you'll maybe seen in Morrison's or the Co-op. Sainsbury's are taking that on now. So Hip Flask Spirits is our volume brand, which means that it gives us a different proposition. So we don't with our Gin Bothy range, which is all hand numbered, hand batched, and small batch, isn't something I ever wanted to do with supermarket, and I'd said no for years. And then I thought, why don't we create a range that we can sell to supermarkets that still uses natural Scottish juice within the liqueurs, but it means that I don't compromise the Bothy brand, and that's what happened. So that was Hip Flask Spirits. And then we added Rum Bothy to the range. We have the most award-winning rum in Scotland. It uses a saffron that's grown in Forfar. So
Saffron and Forfa. Is that
up
the world's most precious spice, saffron?
most expensive spice.
Grown in Forfa.
Yeah, grown in Forfar. They grow it on strawberry beds, it's food grade crocus. They gather it with tweezers, dry it on the aga, and I add it to the rum. So that's our saffron, but it gives it the most beautiful, like a really burnt orange that comes through, which is this. So that's a rum bothy. And then obviously within Bothy Distillery, whilst we produce our spirits there, we will be laying down Glen Prosen single malt, which is the next chapter for us.
Did I read somewhere that you had your gin in the Oscars goodie bag? Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's true.
How did that
Yeah,
happen?
right place, right time. So there's an amazing um accommodation business here that I do some tastings with, and they had gifted a stay in their castle to the Oscars goodie bag,
Uh-huh.
and they were a spirit partner. Now at that point we were just entering the US market, and the spirit producer that they had been in talks with had let them down, and they'd asked, "Do you know any Scottish producers?" And she'd mentioned that I might be interested, and we started conversation, and I actually get them enough product at that point. So they loved the gin that much, and it's 100% natural Scottish botanicals that are just incredible in a gin. And they said, right, we'll wait for you. So the year later, we had 28 bottles in the Oscar goodie bag. So it was great PR for us and fantastic for the team. It didn't do a huge amount for sales, to be honest, but of all the things that I've done over the years, that's the one thing that people talk about. There's over 15 million hits on our brand at that point. And, so it was amazing that I was able to showcase, a Scottish product over, in America. So yeah, anything to build up brand Scotland is great, and yeah, we're really chuffed with that.
It's just a great wee story, isn't it? I was on your US website, and how do you find that? I spoke to lots of people about selling to the US, and it's more complicated now. But you've got a very clear website with a very neat proposition. There's not a million products. I mean, how many products are there on your US website?
So there's only two products that are available. Our original classic London Dry. It's from the mountains, heather, milk thistle, pine and rosemary. So that's our original classic gin. And then we have our Gunshot liqueur. I would say that pre-COVID, it was much easier to deal with the US market. We pitched, there was 84 brands pitched to go into Total Wines in the US, which is a retailer there. And there was four products that they selected, two of mine and two of a very large brand. And I wanted one state initially in the US. We knew from our visitors to our visitor experience in Glams that Texas, for example, was a really strong state for us. But we didn't get one state. We got 23 overnight to 100 stores. And it was a huge opportunity for the brand. It wasn't one that I was able to fulfill. And I think I learned a huge amount about export and the amount of investment and time that it would take to really grow a brand stateside. And it's then that we started looking to work with partners that could help us with that. And we're still at the very early stages of that again. We're kind of starting from scratch again with the US market now because it was just such a huge opportunity, and I wasn't financially or business ready probably to take that size of operation on. We needed investment, we needed infrastructure, and we've secured that now. So yeah, the future looks strong for export.
Just describe your market then. Who's your main market? How do you sell? What's the biggest way of doing this for you?
I think each brand is slightly different. So if we think of our spirit market, um, Gunshot gin for us within the country sports market, just because of the name and the way that you would drink our gin, you could drink it neat in a hip flask. So if you're an adventurer, if you're someone that loves the wilderness, whether that be in the UK or abroad, they resonate with the fact that Bothy is home, and whether that be a home in the hills or a cabin in the woods, the concept of being able to drink our product neat and kind of toast the journey is a really big part of who I appeal to, I think. If it comes to our fruit liqueurs, it's predominantly a female market that love us neat or adding it to a prosecco or a champagne with a celebratory, a birthday treat purchase. So both categories are quite different. But ultimately our roots lie in the Glen, and that country sports, that outdoor adventure, the Monroe baggers, the people that are taking us with them on their journey is definitely where our UK market sits.
Let's talk about the whiskey. The whiskey, just let me get my head straight. The whiskey you use already for your mixes and your where does that come from?
So we decided that until our own single malt would be ready, that with our master blender, we'd selected 10 casks that over the next 5 years we would bottle as our private cask collection.
Right.
So, for example, the one that we've just bottled under Bothy Distillery is an Aberlour 12-year-old. So that was a relatively rare cask. One of our investors' personal favourites is Aberlour, and we wanted to bring a 12-year-old to market. We only did one cask, so there was 327 bottles, 300 bottles released to market, and that's our first kind of foray into private cask. And they'll be sold really only in our own shops, our visitor centre in Glams, up the Glen, and in our Bothy larder shop in Forfar. So Bothy Distillery over the next 5 years will have these 10 expressions that we'll bottle from private cask until our own spirit is ready. There's a lot of debate about when we bottle. My wish list is to hold out for 12 years and let people take the new make journey with us
Mm.
at each stage. But ultimately, to me, the 12-year-old point is where we're going for Glen Prosen single malt.
And who's your master blender? You said you'd talk about your master blender later.
Yeah, so absolutely delighted that the only man in our team so far is Ron Welsh. So Ron, to many of your listeners, I'm sure they'll know, he spent over 30 years with Beam Suntory, with Lafroig, Bowmore. He retired after the Aston Martin series with Bowmore, and I was looking for a master blender. I hadn't really earmarked who that person was going to be, and yeah, the universe gave me Ron, which I'm absolutely delighted about. I took him up to the Glen Prosen site and talked through my vision, what we were looking to achieve, the type of flavour that we were hoping to bring, and he said, "Yeah, I'm in." So I'd like to say I took him out of retirement to come and work with us at the distillery. But he's an incredible experience.
Yeah.
He's great fun, and that wisdom and that knowledge is something that we're only starting that path with, and I'm really delighted that we've built a team of people around us that are both experienced and passionate about the project we have in Glen Prosen.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you're on this starting point of your whiskey, your malt. So you've got a lot of buying questions, haven't you? What casks you buy?
Yep.
Tell me about the process. Where are you and all that? And what will you be buying? Or have you already bought them? How does it work?
Well, it actually started about 2.5 years ago. So I secured an investor, is an American investor. They're based in Kentucky. And one of the things I wanted to do was secure first fill, amazing quality bourbon casks. And where better to go, right, than Kentucky? So I went over to meet him and his team and visited. Ironically, then he took me to a site that he said, "This is where I'd love to get the casks from." And it was Kelvin Cooperage that's over in the US. So they moved over to Kentucky, saw right round their plant, looked at the type of casks that they had access to. Some of the bigger brands are looking for the same cask, so 100 of one style, and that's
Mm.
really I'm interested in. We're doing one cask a day, so our production is much smaller, obviously, than the bigger companies. So the discussions there let me see the quality of cask, how important casks were, the charring, the whole process was just incredible. And then once we came back to Scotland and I started looking at the type of whisky profile that we were looking to produce, and then our master blender Ron came on board and we started having the conversations about casks. So the casks we're not going to take to Glen Prosen until about 6 weeks before filling. That's the optimum time he believes he wants them up there. But yeah, we've decided.
When's filling? When does that start?
So ideally,
Really?
to to be filling in December. The casks come on, the stills, sorry, come on site at the end of this month, but commissioning and the brew house work is probably going to be, because of holidays, into December. So my wish list of December filling is probably moving into January now. I just want to get started, but we're doing something that's going to be here a long time, so there's no rush, but I'm quite eager to start filling. So yeah, that'll be January. So the casks will then come on site, and we have 3 different casks that we're working with at the moment. First bill bourbon, and then we've got different finishing casks that can't possibly tell you about at the moment, but anybody
Really?
at the Glen will be delighted to see. And some other casks, as I've learnt more about casks that I'd like to age some of it, even our gins and our rums in. The flavour profile that we've done on some of the test batches on gin and rum have been incredible as well. And that's all started through my kind of knowledge of casks and the whisky journey. We've got an area in the visitor centre called Cooper's Corner, and Ron and the team have been gathering some of the old cooperage tools. Obviously, we've got our own new tools that we'll need, but some of the old tools and the importance of cask selection, cask maintenance, is something that, yeah, I'd like some of our maybe not so experienced whisky customers to come on that journey with us, because I really believe that that's so important to the flavour that we're hoping to produce.
It is exciting, isn't it? As we say, cask to glass. What kind of flavour do you hope to produce?
So because we're in the Cairngorm National Park, we are actually a Highland distillery. We're the lowest point of the Cairngorm National Park. So it will be at a Highland. And everything down to the shape of the still arm, to the angle of the arm, Ron has planned with sort of foresight to give us a really, as he says, a beautiful Highland malt. Um, and yeah, we'll have to wait and see, won't we? Exactly the flavour that's going to come through. But he's quite confident that we'll know pretty soon, that our signature malt flavour will be. So you'll have to come up and taste it. And
Well, hey, I'd love to. I'm excited for you. I find the start of the journey is the fun bit, isn't it? Because then it's like sport, it's like broadcasting, getting started. That's the bit.
Well, and it got even more exciting a couple of weeks ago. So we the boreholes in, and we sent the water through to be sampled. And when they did the sample, they'd said to Ron, where did you get that water sample? And he said, oh, it's a distillery I'm working with in Glen Prosen. And they said, we've never sampled water that pure. And I thought, well, if that's the water, imagine what the whiskey's going to taste like. So it's, I feel really blessed that we're at the point that we are. And it's the gift that keeps giving. I mean, it's just the most amazing sight. The water's there. We've got the experience now with the whiskey team that we're bringing in. So yeah, we are excited, nervous as well,
Yeah,
because it's
yeah.
a longer term project. And what better a neighbour that one that sits still for 10 years. And our whole brand is built on 3 principles. So nature is our neighbour, and how we continuing this guardianship of being able to survive in the Glen and maintain the Glen. And history is our guide, and learning from everything that's happened up there before, whether it be the illicit stills, whether it be from people that have created whisky in the past or are looking to get involved in the distillery and a new distillery, and then spirit is our future. So we can't change the past of the Glen, but we can shape and change the future, and that's what we aim to do. So those 3 pillars kind of guide our next chapter.
Brilliant. Let's end on the circularity of your business, because I know you do some foraging,
Yep.
and I know that what you've done is you took the fruit from the jam effectively and stuck it into the gin, and once it's in the gin, it goes back into the jam. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's no way. 'Cause
Circular.
yeah, it's completely circular. And if any of your listeners have visited any of our sites, we have on the wall the full seasonal calendar. It starts with gorse gathering in early March, and then right through to Scots pine, and then through our fruit calendar. And although whiskey is quite different, there are things that I believe we can do to enhance some whiskey experiences. Like, for example, when we started talking about the highballs, we a workshop last weekend in Glen Prosen with rowan berries, and we did a rowan berry jam. It's like a jelly jam that you could use with cheese and biscuits. Now, even the whiskey purists that would have a whiskey neat could also have a round berry chutneys on a cracker. And also we've got rosehip syrups. We're doing that at the moment. There are things that we can still use nature's larder to help enhance a visitor experience at the distillery. And over next year, we've got a series of events in 2026 that'll take people on the seasonal calendar if they want to, or on the smuggling route up into the Glen to the Bothy. So whether you're into whiskey or whether you just love nature, I hope that there's something there for everybody.
Kim, great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just stop that.
We're never going home. Can we stay with you in Scotland for the rest of our lives? We're